Sorry about that noise, guys. I don't know what it is, but ever since I first watched this episode, it's like there's been some bumblebee buzzing around in the room. And there it goes in another room. We should be fine now. Let's get on with this review. Finally, we get to see Blake and Yang. Like last episode, this episode is split into two different stories. One focusing on Blake and one focusing on Yang. However, there isn't a lot to talk about with this one. This one is mostly setting up their story arcs because, let's face it, Blake and Yang are both characters in desperate need of some character development. I mean, we've learned about their characters, and they've definitely grown as people over the course of the show so far. But aside from Blake having a history with the terrorist organization, the White Fang, and Yang looking for her mom, we don't really have any personal stories for these two characters yet. And I'm not going to lie, I'm excited by the fact that we get the introductions to both of their story arcs in the same episode. Because that suggests to me that they are going to parallel each other and depend upon each other and otherwise be interconnected. And they should be, because every indication up to this point has been that these two characters grow best as characters when their stories are interconnected. They have a natural rapport with each other that I don't think any other two characters in this show quite measure up to. Let's start with Blake's part of this episode first. We see that she's on a boat and she is trying her best to stay away from others, to keep to herself. However, someone seems to be following her, someone in a cloak, and it turns out to be Sun. And I know that there are a lot of people who feel very differently than me, but I don't like Sun at all. I just find him kind of annoying. He hasn't served any substantial purpose to the story since he was first introduced. And even then I would argue that his impact on the story was minimal. Now maybe pairing him up with Blake for this journey that Blake has undertaken is going to change that, is going to validate his character and give him reason to actually be here again. But until that happens, he just annoys me. Him being here just annoys me, because while you can make a strong argument that some of the characters in this show are less developed than they should be at this point, Sun is inexcusably underdeveloped for a character that has been present for so long. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bummed out when we found out why she was on this ship, where it is that she was going, and what it is that she plans to do. There were really two possibilities after the end of Volume 3. One, that she would go after Adam Taurus and the White Fang herself, or two, she would become so fearful of them that she would run away. And we find out that it's the latter. And I don't think it all stems from fear. I think some of it stems from guilt. She's worried that if she stays near her friends, that Adam will target her other friends the way that he did Yang. But that's all the more reason for her to stay close to them, to help them, to inform them of what is coming, to focus on getting stronger with them. Because Adam's still going to target her friends even if she's not there with them. He's just that kind of guy. But at the same time, I didn't want her to go after the White Fang on her own because, frankly, she's not strong enough. She just would have gotten herself hurt. So overall, I don't think Blake's motivations here would have been satisfying to me one way or another. I'm just kind of left hoping that something great comes of this as the season progresses. I also want to point out it was pretty awesome getting to see Blake take the lead in a fight for a change. Usually she plays more of a support role, and even though she wasn't the only character fighting the giant Grimm that attacked in this episode, she was definitely the point man in that fight, and it was a nice change of pace. Which covers everything that I want to talk about regarding Blake and brings us to Yang's story in this episode. Ever since we found out that there was going to be a time jump in between the end of Volume 3 and the beginning of Volume 4, I was worried that they were going to skip over showing us how Yang came to cope with the loss of her arm. That the volume would start, she'd have a new prosthetic, and she'd be at the point where she's not quite back to where she was before, but she's definitely getting there, and she'd be mostly good as new, and thankfully they didn't do that, because as much as I want to see Yang back to the person she used to be, as much as I hate seeing her in pain, seeing her having to change everything about how she does everything to accommodate the fact that a part of her is literally gone, the fact is Yang is now a disabled character, and the writers wrote that. They have to commit to it now. That's their responsibility. And even though we don't see her actually having to cope with the loss of her arm initially, we do get a fairly extended sequence of her doing everyday things with one arm and how she is adapted to using only one arm. It was very well done. The animators could have chosen to just not show her use her arms at all for a while and just told us that things are different now, but they made the choice to show it, and I really appreciate that. And even though Yang does get the prosthetic arm in this episode, she doesn't put it on right away. I think because she doesn't feel like she deserves it. I think part of her journey to recovery is going to be tied in with her learning to appreciate herself again, learning to believe that she is worthy again after such a huge failure. And that when she finally does put that arm on, it's going to be symbolic of not having healed completely, because this isn't something you ever completely recover from, but of Yang reaching a point where it's possible for her to return to something like what she was, the person that she was. But what I was actually most impressed with in this entire episode was the portrayal of Yang's PTSD. It's not something I can really describe here, you just have to go watch the episode, but it's pretty clear that while she's trying to pretend like nothing's wrong, she has been shaken to her core by what happened to her. And that's something that it's not going to be easy for her to learn how to cope with. But I definitely think she can do it. And with how well the introduction to her character arc was handled in this episode, I have a lot of faith in the writers and the animators that they'll do a good job of conveying how difficult a process that is, and helping us to feel what this character feels, because that's going to be important for this arc going forward. All that said, guys, what did you think of this episode? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.